The outsider. Jake Thompson stood out like a sore thumb in the prestigious Galactic Psychic Academy. His unruly brown hair and stocky build contrasted sharply with the sleek, elongated forms of his alien classmates. As the first human ever admitted to the academy, he was a constant source of fascination, and more often than not, frustration for both his peers and instructors. The classroom hummed with psychic energy as students engaged in a routine mental exercise. Instructor Zix, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, glided between the hovering meditation pods, monitoring each student's progress with a series of rapid blinks from their compound eyes. Jake sat cross-legged in his pod, eyes closed, brow furrowed in concentration. Unlike his classmates, who slipped effortlessly into the shared mental space, Jake's mind felt like it was wading through molasses. The psychic realm, so natural to the other species, remained stubbornly elusive to his human brain. "Focus, Jake," Instructor Zix's voice reverberated in his mind. "Clear your thoughts. Feel the energy flowing through you." Jake gritted his teeth, redoubling his efforts. He'd been at the academy for 6 months now, and while he'd made some progress, he still lagged far behind his classmates. The constant struggle was wearing him down, but he refused to give up. He was here to prove that humans could hold their own in the psychic arts, and he wouldn't let his entire species down. As he strained to connect with the psychic field, a stray thought slipped through his mental defenses. In an instant, the sterile white of the classroom melted away, replaced by a vibrant, chaotic landscape pulled straight from Jake's imagination. The other students gasped collectively as their shared mental space was suddenly invaded by unfamiliar imagery. Rolling hills of deep purple grass stretched out beneath a sky painted in swirls of green and gold. Bizarre creatures that were part machine, part organic matter lumbered across the landscape, their movements accompanied by a cacophony of whirs, clicks, and bellows. Instructor Zix's mental presence flared with alarm. "Jake, what are you doing? Withdraw immediately." But Jake couldn't hear the instructor's commands. He was lost in his own creation, his mind spinning out more and more fantastic details. Floating islands drifted overhead, waterfalls of glittering liquid metal cascading from their edges. In the distance, a city of impossible architecture rose, its spires twisting in defiance of physics, pulsing with energy that seemed to beat in time with Jake's own heart. The other students' minds reeled, overwhelmed by the assault of alien concepts and imagery. Some struggled to maintain their psychic connections, while others instinctively retreated, severing their links to the shared space. In the physical classroom, pods began to shake. Students emerged, gasping and disoriented. Instructor Zix's normally composed features contorted with effort as they attempted to regain control of the situation. "Everyone, disengage now," Zix commanded, their voice cutting through both the mental and physical realms. With a collective effort, the remaining students pulled back, leaving only Jake still connected to the wild dreamscape. His pod hummed ominously, arcs of energy crackling across its surface. Zix approached cautiously, placing a slender hand on Jake's shoulder. "Jake, you must wake up. This is dangerous." The touch acted like a catalyst. Jake's eyes snapped open, and the psychic backlash hit like a thunderclap. Every screen and holographic display in the room shattered. Students were thrown back in their pods, and Instructor Zix stumbled, their iridescent skin flickering erratically. As the chaos subsided, all eyes turned to Jake. He sat in his pod, panting heavily, a thin trickle of blood running from his nose. The room was dead silent save for the faint sizzle of fried electronics. Instructor Zix was the first to recover, straightening up and fixing Jake with a gaze that mixed concern, fear, and something else, a grudging hint of respect. "Mr. Thompson," Zix said, their voice unnaturally calm, "I believe we need to have a discussion about the nature of your abilities." Jake looked around the room, taking in the destruction and the shocked faces of his classmates. A mix of emotions washed over him: embarrassment, fear, but also a growing sense of excitement. For the first time since he'd arrived at the academy, he felt like he tapped into something truly powerful. "I'm sorry, instructor," Jake said, wiping the blood from his nose. "I don't know what happened. It was like my imagination just took over." Zix's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "Indeed. It seems we've been approaching your training from entirely the wrong angle. Your human mind works quite differently from ours, but that doesn't mean it's less powerful. Quite the opposite, it appears." The other students began to murmur among themselves, stealing glances at Jake that ranged from wary to intrigued. Erex, a Volcran student with metallic scales and piercing silver eyes, spoke up. "How is this possible? Humans aren't supposed to have any psychic abilities." "That," Instructor Zix said, helping Jake out of his pod, "is something we're going to have to reevaluate. Mr. Thompson, if you're feeling up to it, I'd like you to come with me to see the academy director. The rest of you, class is dismissed for today. Please report to the medical bay for standard post-incident checkups." As Jake followed Zix out of the classroom on shaky legs, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. He'd come to the academy to learn, but it seemed he might end up teaching the aliens a thing or two about the power of the human mind. The corridors of the Galactic Psychic Academy seemed to stretch endlessly as Jake and Instructor Zix made their way to the director's office. Other students and faculty members they passed turned to stare, news of the classroom incident already spreading through the psychic grapevine. Jake's mind raced, replaying the events in the classroom. He'd always had a vivid imagination, but he'd never dreamed it could manifest like this. The memory of the alien landscape he created still burned bright in his mind, more real than any dream he'd ever had. "Instructor," Jake ventured, breaking the silence, "what exactly happened back there? I've never been able to project anything into the shared space before." Zix's antennae quivered thoughtfully. "I'm not entirely sure, Jake. In all my years of teaching, I've never encountered anything quite like it. It seems your human brain, when fully engaged, can generate psychic constructs of remarkable complexity and force." They arrived at a set of ornate doors that shimmered with a faint blue light. Zix placed their hand on a glowing panel, and the doors slid open silently. The office beyond was a marvel of alien architecture. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal, pulsing gently with inner light. In the center of the room, seated behind a desk that appeared to be crafted from a single piece of flowing liquid metal, was Director Vaxloren. The director was an imposing figure, even for their species, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Vaxloren exuded an aura of ancient wisdom and barely contained power. "Ah, Instructor Zix," the director's voice resonated in their minds rather than their ears. "And young Jake Thompson, I've been expecting you." Jake swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of how out of place he was in this bastion of alien psychic mastery. "Director, I'm sorry about what happened in class. I didn't mean to." Vaxloren held up one of their 4 hands, silencing Jake mid-sentence. "No apologies necessary, Mr. Thompson. What occurred today was unexpected, certainly, but not unwelcome." The director's gaze seemed to pierce right through Jake, making him feel exposed in a way that even the shared psychic exercises never had. "Tell me, Jake," Vaxloren continued, "how did it feel when you created that mindscape?" Jake paused, considering the question. "It felt natural. Like I was finally doing what I was meant to do. Everything just flowed, and it was as if I could shape reality itself with my thoughts." The director nodded, a ripple of deep blue passing across their skin. "Fascinating. You see, Jake, we accepted you into this academy as an experiment. Many doubted that humans possessed any psychic potential at all. But I suspected there was more to your species than met the eye." Vaxloren stood, moving around the desk with fluid grace. "What you demonstrated today was not traditional psychic ability as we understand it. It was something different, something potentially far more powerful." Jake's heart raced at the director's words. More powerful? but I can barely keep up in regular classes. How can what I did be more powerful?" Zix spoke up, their voice tinged with excitement. "Think about it, Jake. Our psychic abilities are based on manipulating existing energies, on perceiving and influencing the world as it is. But you created an entire world from nothing but your imagination." "Precisely," Vax agreed. "The human mind, it seems, has the potential to be not just a conduit for psychic energy, but a source of it, a creator rather than merely a manipulator." The implications of what they were saying began to dawn on Jake. If what they were suggesting was true, it could change everything, not just for him, but for humanity's place in the galactic community. "So what happens now?" Jake asked, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. The director's skin rippled with a pattern that Jake had come to recognize as their equivalent of a smile. "Now, Mr. Thompson, we adapt. Your training will need to be customized. We'll need to explore the full extent of your abilities, find ways to control and channel them." Zix nodded enthusiastically. "I'd be honored to oversee Jake's specialized training, Director." "Excellent," Vax said. "But be warned, both of you, this is uncharted territory. There may be risks we cannot foresee." Jake straightened up, a determined look in his eyes. "I understand, Director. I'm ready to face whatever challenges come. I won't let you down." As they left the director's office, Jake's mind was reeling with the possibilities that lay ahead. He'd come to the academy feeling like an outsider, struggling to fit in. Now it seemed he might be on the verge of revolutionizing their understanding of psychic abilities. The corridor outside was empty, but Jake could feel the subtle buzz of psychic energy that permeated the academy. For the first time, it didn't feel alien or out of reach. It felt like potential, waiting to be shaped by his will. Zix placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, their skin shimmering with what Jake had learned to recognize as excitement. "We have much work ahead of us, Jake. Are you prepared?" Jake nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "More than ready, instructor. Let's show the galaxy what the human mind can really do." As they walked back towards the classroom areas, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. Erex, the Volcrin student, observed them with narrowed silver eyes, a complex mix of emotions playing across their metallic features. The game had changed, and the repercussions would soon be felt throughout the academy and beyond. Unleashed potential. The days following the classroom incident were a whirlwind of activity for Jake. News of his unprecedented psychic manifestation spread through the academy like wildfire, transforming him overnight from an oddity to a subject of intense fascination and debate. Jake's training schedule was completely overhauled. Instead of struggling through standard psychic exercises, he now spent hours with instructor Zix in specially designed simulation chambers, exploring the limits of his newfound abilities. "Concentrate, Jake," Zix encouraged, their voice echoing in the empty white room. "Remember how it felt in the classroom. Let your mind create freely." Jake closed his eyes, reaching for that sense of uninhibited creation he'd experienced before. Slowly, the sterile whiteness around him began to change. Colors bubbled into existence, shapes formed and shifted. Within moments, he stood in a lush jungle, the air heavy with the scent of alien flowers and the sounds of impossible creatures. Zix walked around, marveling at the detail. They reached out to touch a broad leaf, their fingers passing through the psychic construct. Remarkable. The level of sensory detail you're able to generate is unprecedented. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jake's powers, while impressive, were still raw and unpredictable. Some days, he could reshape entire environments with a thought. Other days, he struggled to manifest even the simplest objects. "It's like trying to control a fire hose with my mind," Jake complained after a particularly frustrating session. "Sometimes it flows perfectly, and sometimes it just explodes in my face." Zix nodded sympathetically. "Your human brain is adapting to abilities it was never designed for. Patience and practice will be key." As Jake's training progressed, He began to notice changes in how the other students treated him. Some, like his roommate Kelix, a bioluminescent Aetherian, were openly supportive. "It's about time you humans showed us something interesting." Kelix teased good-naturedly, his tendrils glowing with friendly colors. Others, however, were less enthusiastic. Jake often caught whispers and sidelong glances in the corridors. Some students seemed afraid of him, while others regarded him with barely concealed resentment. This tension came to a head one day in the Academy's communal dining hall. Jake was sitting with Kelix, discussing his latest training breakthrough, when Erex approached their table. The Volcrin students' metallic scales gleamed under the soft lighting, their silver eyes fixed intently on Jake. "Thompson," Erex said, their voice carrying a hint of challenge, "I hear you've been making quite a splash in your private sessions." Jake shifted uncomfortably. He'd never had much interaction with Erex before, but he knew the Volcrin was one of the top students in their year. "Just trying to catch up to the rest of you," he replied cautiously. Erex's eyes narrowed. "Catch up? From what I hear, you're attempting to rewrite the entire book on psychic abilities. Some are even suggesting your anomaly might make you the most powerful student in the Academy." The dining hall had gone quiet, other students watching the exchange with rapt attention. Jake could feel the weight of their stares, the mix of curiosity and tension in the air. "Look, Erex, I'm not trying to rewrite anything," Jake said, standing up to face the Volcrin. "I'm just learning to use whatever abilities I have, same as everyone else here." Erex let out a sound that might have been a laugh, a metallic rasp that sent shivers down Jake's spine. "Same as everyone. Don't be naive, human. You're an aberration, a fluke, and some of us aren't convinced your untested, uncontrolled abilities belong in this academy at all." Jake felt a flash of anger, and with it, a surge of psychic energy. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment, the dining hall seemed to waver, reality threatening. Jake felt a flash of anger, and with it, a surge of psychic energy. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment, the dining hall seemed to waver, reality threatening to bend to his will. Gasps echoed through the room as students instinctively backed away. With a supreme effort of will, Jake reined in his emotions, forcing the psychic energy back down. The shimmering faded, but the tension in the room remained palpable. Erex's silver eyes widened slightly, a mix of fear and something else. Envy, perhaps, flashing across their metallic features. "You see," they hissed. "Unstable. Dangerous." Before Jake could respond, Instructor Zix's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "That's quite enough, Erex." The instructor glided into the dining hall, their iridescent skin pulsing with calming patterns. "Jake's abilities may be different, but they have been sanctioned by the director themselves. He has as much right to be here as any of you." Erex's scales rippled in what Jake had learned was a sign of frustration, but they backed down. "As you say, instructor, but some of us remain unconvinced." As Erex stalked away and the other students began to disperse, Zix turned to Jake. "Are you all right?" Jake nodded, his heart still racing. "Yeah, I'm fine. But Erex isn't entirely wrong, is he? My abilities are unstable." Zix's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "All great power requires control, Jake. The fact that you were able to suppress that outburst shows you're making progress. But perhaps it's time we accelerate your training." Over the next few weeks, Jake's sessions with Zix intensified. They spent hours in the simulation chambers, pushing the limits of Jake's abilities. He learned to create not just static environments, but dynamic, interactive scenarios. Entire worlds sprang to life at his command, populated by creatures born from the depths of his imagination. But it wasn't just creation that Zix focused on. They also worked tirelessly on control, teaching Jake to modulate his power, to shape it with precision rather than raw force. "Imagine your mind as a lens," Zix instructed during one particularly grueling session. "You can focus your power to a pinpoint or spread it wide. The key is maintaining clarity and control, no matter the scale. As Jake's skills grew, so did his confidence. He began to hold his own in regular classes, his unique approach to psychic manipulation often yielding surprising results. Some instructors were baffled, others intrigued, but all had to admit that Jake was making remarkable progress. Not everyone was pleased with these developments, however. Erex and a small group of like-minded students continued to view Jake with suspicion and resentment. Whispers followed him in the corridors, and more than once he entered a room to find conversations abruptly halted. It all came to a head one evening as Jake was leaving a late training session. He rounded a corner to find Erex waiting for him, flanked by two other students, a crystalline quartz being and a hovering, gas-filled nebulite. "Thompson," Erex said, their voice cold. "We need to talk." Jake tensed, ready to call upon his powers if necessary. "I'm listening." Erex's scales rippled with barely contained anger. "You've made quite a name for yourself lately. The human wonder, rewriting the rules of psychic manipulation. But some of us think it's time you were put to the test." "What are you suggesting?" Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "A duel," Erex said, confirming Jake's suspicions. "A true test of psychic might. No more controlled environments, no more coddling from the instructors. Just you and me, mind to mind." Jake's heart raced. Psychic duels were a time-honored tradition at the academy, but they were also notoriously dangerous. Minds could be broken, psyches shattered. And Jake, for all his progress, was still a novice compared to someone like Erex. "I don't think that's a good idea," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Our abilities are too different. It wouldn't be a fair comparison." Erex's laugh was like metal scraping on stone. "Fair? Nothing about your presence here is fair, human. You've upended centuries of psychic theory, made a mockery of our traditions. It's time you proved your worth, or exposed yourself as the fraud some of us believe you to be." Jake felt a surge of anger, and with it, a familiar rush of psychic energy. The air around him began to shimmer, reality rippling at the edges of his vision. Erex and the other students took an involuntary step back. For a moment, Jake was tempted to let loose, to show Erex and the others exactly what he was capable of. But Zix's lessons in control echoed in his mind. With a deep breath, he pulled the power back, letting it simmer just beneath the surface. "You want a duel, Erex?" Jake said, his voice low and steady. "Fine. You've got one. But don't say I didn't warn you." A predatory grin spread across Erex's metallic features. "Excellent. 3 days from now, in the Grand Arena. I'll make the arrangements." As Erex and the others walked away, Jake leaned against the wall, his mind reeling. What had he just agreed to? He was good, yes, but Erex had years of training and experience. This wasn't just a test, it was a fight for his very place at the academy. With a grim determination, Jake pushed off from the wall and headed towards Instructor Zix's quarters. If he was going to survive this duel, he'd need every advantage he could get. It was time to take his training to the next level. As he walked, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this duel would be more than just a personal challenge. It felt like a turning point, not just for him, but for humanity's place in the galaxy. Win or lose, nothing would be the same after this. The news of the impending duel spread through the academy like wildfire. Students and faculty alike buzzed with excitement and speculation. The human upstart against the Volcran prodigy. It was a matchup that captured everyone's imagination. Jake threw himself into preparation with a fervor that surprised even Instructor Zix. They spent every available moment in the simulation chambers, refining Jake's control and expanding his repertoire of psychic techniques. "Remember," Zix cautioned during one intense session, "Erex will be expecting you to rely on your creative abilities. You need to be prepared for direct psychic assault as well. Shield your mind, probe for weaknesses, and above all, stay focused." Jake nodded, Sweat beading on his brow as he fended off a barrage of psychic projectiles Zix had conjured. I understand, but I can't fight like Erex. I need to use what makes me unique. Zix's antennae twitched in agreement. Indeed, your human imagination is your greatest strength, but it must be tempered with discipline and strategy. As the day of the duel approached, Jake found support from unexpected quarters. Kellix and a growing group of students who had come to respect Jake's dedication rallied around him. They helped him study Volcran psychic techniques, shared stories of past duels, and offered words of encouragement. Even some of the faculty, intrigued by Jake's unusual abilities, offered advice. Professor Lerna, an ancient, tree-like being who taught advanced psychic theory, pulled Jake aside after class one day. Your mind works differently from ours, young human, Lerna creaked, leaves rustling thoughtfully. In the duel, don't try to match Eric's technique for technique. Flow like water around stone, adapt and surprise. That is your path to victory. Finally, the day of the duel arrived. The grand arena, a vast psychic amplification chamber at the heart of the academy, was packed with spectators. The air thrummed with anticipation and the barely contained psychic energy of hundreds of trained minds. Jake stood at one end of the arena, trying to calm his racing heart. Across from him, Erex cut an imposing figure, their metallic scales gleaming under the arena's ethereal lighting. Director Vax Lauren's voice resonated through the chamber, silencing the murmuring crowd. This duel will test not just psychic strength, but adaptability, creativity, and control. The contest will end when one participant yields or is rendered unconscious. Are the combatants ready? Jake met Erex's silver eyes and nodded grimly. Erex's scales rippled in acknowledgement. Then let the duel commence. The psychic barriers separating Jake and Erex fell, and immediately the air between them came alive with crackling energy. Erex wasted no time, launching a barrage of razor-sharp psychic shards towards Jake. Jake's training kicked in. He threw up a hasty mental shield, deflecting most of the assault, but a few shards broke through, sending lances of pain through his mind. Gritting his teeth, Jake counterattacked. He reached deep into his imagination, drawing forth the alien jungle he had created in his training sessions. Vines burst from the arena floor, writhing towards Erex like living tentacles. The Volcran's eyes widened in surprise, but they recovered quickly, their scales hardening into a protective psychic armor. The duel raged on, a spectacular display of contrasting psychic styles. Erex's attacks were precise, calculated, each strike aimed to exploit a weakness. Jake's defense was more fluid, the environment around him constantly shifting, presenting Erex with an ever-changing battlefield. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Both combatants were tiring, their psychic energies beginning to flag. Jake could feel a pressure building behind his eyes, a sure sign he was approaching his limits. Erex, sensing weakness, pressed their advantage. They launched a massive psychic spear, a concentrated burst of mental energy aimed straight at Jake's core. Time seemed to slow. Jake saw the attack coming but knew his depleted shields couldn't hope to stop it. In that moment of crisis, a new idea blossomed in his mind. Instead of trying to block the spear, Jake opened his mind fully. He took the energy of Erex's attack and reshaped it, his human imagination working at lightning speed. The spear morphed in midair, transforming into a dazzling array of ethereal butterflies that swirled harmlessly around Jake before dissipating. The arena fell silent, everyone stunned by the unprecedented display of psychic manipulation. Even Erex stood motionless, their silver eyes wide with disbelief. Seizing the moment, Jake launched his final attack. He reached out with his mind, not to harm Erex, but to share. In a rush of psychic energy, he opened his thoughts, flooding Erex's mind with a lifetime of human experiences, the wonder of a child seeing snow for the first time, the thrill of soaring through the clouds in an aircraft, the complex emotions of human love and loss. Eric staggered under the onslaught, overwhelmed by the alien sensations and emotions. Their psychic defenses crumbled, and they fell to their knees, silver eyes unfocused. I yield," Eric gasped, their voice barely a whisper. The arena erupted in chaos. Students and faculty alike were on their feet, shouting and gesticulating. Jake swayed on his feet, exhausted but triumphant. Director Vax Lauren's voice cut through the tumult. "The duel is concluded. Victory goes to Jake Thompson of Earth." As the implications of what had just occurred began to sink in, Jake knew that this was more than just a personal victory. He had proven, beyond any doubt, that humanity had a place among the psychic races of the galaxy. The human imagination, it seemed, was a force to be reckoned with. The duel of minds. The aftermath of Jake's victory in the psychic duel sent shockwaves through the Galactic Psychic Academy. What had started as a personal challenge had become a watershed moment, forcing everyone to reevaluate their understanding of psychic potential and the role of humans in the greater galactic community. Jake found himself at the center of a maelstrom of attention. Students who had once avoided him now sought him out, eager to learn more about his unique abilities. Faculty members debated the implications of his techniques, with some calling for a complete overhaul of the Academy's curriculum to incorporate what they were calling human creative psychics. But not everyone was thrilled with this turn of events. Jake could sense an undercurrent of tension, particularly among some of the more conservative elements of the Academy. He caught whispers in the corridors, felt the weight of suspicious glares. "They're afraid of you now," Kellex told him one evening as they sat in the Academy's lush meditation gardens. The Aetherian's bioluminescent tendrils pulsed with concerned colors. "You've shown them something they don't understand, and that scares them." Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I never wanted to scare anyone. I just wanted to prove I belonged here. And you have," came a familiar metallic voice. Jake and Kellex looked up to see Erex approaching, their silver eyes glinting in the soft light of the garden. Jake tensed, unsure of what to expect. The last time he'd seen Erex had been at the end of the duel, when the Volcran had been overwhelmed by the psychic onslaught of human experiences. To Jake's surprise, Erex's posture was not confrontational. If anything, they seemed hesitant. "Thompson," Erex said, their scales rippling in what Jake now recognized as a sign of discomfort. I owe you an apology." Jake blinked in surprise. "You do." Erex nodded, their metallic features set in a solemn expression. "What you showed me during our duel, I've never experienced anything like it. The depth of human emotion, the vividity of your imagination. It was overwhelming, yes, but also enlightening." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I'm glad you feel that way, Erex. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to share, to help you understand." "And I do understand, now," Erex said. "At least I'm beginning to. Which is why I have a proposal for you." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of proposal?" Erex's scales shimmered, a sign of excitement. "A collaboration. Your creative psychic abilities combined with my technical expertise. I believe together we could push the boundaries of what's possible in psychic manipulation." The idea was intriguing, but Jake hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, Erex, but how do I know this isn't some kind of trick? You weren't exactly my biggest fan before the duel." Erex's silver eyes dimmed slightly. "I deserved that. My behavior was regrettable. But the experience we shared has changed me, Thompson. I see now that there's so much more to psychic potential than I ever imagined. I want to explore that with your help." Jake studied Erex carefully, reaching out with his newfound psychic senses. He could feel the sincerity radiating from the Volcran, along with a mix of curiosity and excitement. "All right," Jake said finally. "Let's give it a shot. But we take it slow, okay? We've got a lot of trust to build." Erex's scales rippled with relief and enthusiasm. "Agreed. We'll start small and see where it leads us." As Erex left to make arrangements for their collaboration, Kellex turned to Jake, his tendrils glowing with a mix of concern and admiration. "You're really going to work with them, after everything that happened?" Jake nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, I think I am. If we're going to change things around here, we need to start by building bridges." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jake split his time between his regular classes, advanced training sessions with Instructor Zix, and his new collaborative project with Erex. Working with the Volcrin was challenging but rewarding. Erex's technical knowledge of psychic theory was vast, and Jake found himself learning as much as he was teaching. Together, they began to develop new techniques that combined Jake's creative manifestations with Erex's precise control. "It's like painting with thought," Jake explained to Director Vaxlorin during one of their progress meetings. "I create the broad strokes, the overall vision, and Erex refines it, adds the details and the structure." Vaxlorin's skin rippled with intrigue. "Fascinating. And you believe this hybrid approach could have practical applications?" Erex nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, Director. We've only scratched the surface, but the potential is enormous. Imagine psychic constructs that are both wildly creative and precisely controlled. The applications in fields like terraforming, medicine, even space exploration could be revolutionary." As word of their work spread, Jake and Erex found themselves at the center of a growing movement within the Academy. Students from diverse species began to approach them, eager to learn and contribute. What had started as a two-person project was evolving into something much bigger. But as their influence grew, so did the pushback. Conservative factions within the Academy viewed their work with suspicion, seeing it as a threat to traditional psychic disciplines. Jake began to notice increased scrutiny of his activities, and rumors circulated that some were calling for restrictions on human enrollment in psychic institutions. The tension came to a head one afternoon as Jake and Erex were demonstrating their latest technique to a group of interested students in one of the Academy's practice arenas. They had just created a stunningly detailed psychic projection of an alien ecosystem, complete with interactive flora and fauna, when a commotion at the entrance caught their attention. A group of senior faculty members, led by Professor Xandrath, a notoriously conservative psych master, stormed into the arena. "This ends now," Xandrath declared, his voice booming with psychic resonance. "These uncontrolled experiments pose too great a risk to the Academy and to psychic study as a whole." Jake felt a surge of anger, but Erex placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let me handle this," the Volcrin whispered. Erex stepped forward, their scales glinting with determination. "Professor Xandrath, with all due respect, you haven't even seen what we're capable of. How can you judge what you don't understand?" Xandrath's eyes narrowed. "I understand plenty, young one. I see the corruption of our sacred traditions, the dilution of pure psychic disciplines with human imagination." He spat the last words as if they were distasteful. Jake couldn't stay silent any longer. He moved to stand beside Erex, facing the disapproving faculty. "Our work isn't about replacing anything," he said, his voice steady. "It's about expansion, about finding new possibilities. Isn't that what science, what progress, is all about?" The standoff might have escalated further, but at that moment, a new voice cut through the tension. "Indeed it is, Mr. Thompson." All heads turned to see Director Vaxlorin gliding into the arena, their presence immediately commanding respect from all present. "Director," Xandrath began, but Vaxlorin held up a hand, silencing him. "I have been observing the work of Mr. Thompson and Erex with great interest," Vaxlorin said, their voice resonating with authority. "While it is unconventional, it also represents the kind of innovation and cross-species collaboration that this academy was founded to encourage." Vaxlorin turned to address the entire gathered crowd. "Change can be uncomfortable, even frightening, but it is also inevitable and necessary. The human capacity for imagination, when combined with our psychic disciplines, opens up possibilities we have only begun to explore. The director's gaze swept over the assembled students and faculty. I am hereby officially sanctioning the continued research and development of these hybrid psychic techniques. Moreover, I am establishing a new department within the Academy specifically dedicated to the study and application of creative psychics. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Jake felt a swell of emotion, relief, pride, and a renewed sense of purpose. Vaxloren wasn't finished. Mr. Thompson, Erex, I would like you both to play key roles in this new department. Your unique partnership embodies the spirit of innovation and cooperation that will drive us forward. As the implications of this announcement sank in, Jake and Erex exchanged a look of stunned disbelief. What had started as a personal challenge had grown into something that would reshape the very foundations of psychic study in the galaxy. The human imagination, it seemed, had found its place among the stars. And this, Jake realized, was only the beginning. Threat from beyond. The weeks following Director Vaxloren's announcement were a whirlwind of activity. The newly established Department of Creative Psychics quickly became the most talked-about subject at the Galactic Psychic Academy. Students from all species clamored to join, eager to explore the groundbreaking fusion of human imagination and alien psychic techniques. Jake and Erex found themselves at the center of it all, working tirelessly to develop curricula, design experiments, and manage the influx of enthusiastic participants. Their partnership had grown stronger through shared challenges, and they made a formidable team. I never thought I'd say this, Erex admitted one evening as they reviewed applications for the department, their metallic scales shimmering with amusement. But working with a human has been the most enlightening experience of my academic career. Jake grinned, leaning back in his chair. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about working with a walking tin can. Their playful banter was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the corridor outside. Alarmed voices and the sound of running feet echoed through the usually quiet halls of the academy. Jake and Erex exchanged a worried glance before rushing out to investigate. They were met by a scene of chaos. Students and faculty were hurrying towards the central auditorium, their faces etched with concern. "What's going on?" Jake asked, grabbing the arm of a passing court student. The crystalline being's facets pulsed with anxiety. "Emergency assembly. The director's calling everyone in. They say we're under attack." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He and Erex quickly joined the flow of bodies streaming towards the auditorium. As they entered the vast chamber, they could feel the tension in the air, a palpable miasma of fear and confusion. Director Vaxloren stood on the central platform, their usually shimmering skin now a dull, worried gray. As the last stragglers filed in, they began to speak, their voice resonating through both the physical space and the collective psychic field of the assembled crowd. "Students, faculty, I regret to inform you that we face a grave threat," Vaxloren began, their tone somber. "Our long-range psychic sensors have detected an approaching force of unknown origin and intent. Their psychic signature is unlike anything we have encountered before." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd. Jake felt Erex tense beside him, the Volcrin scales rattling softly with apprehension. Vaxloren continued, "Initial attempts at communication have failed. More disturbingly, our standard psychic defenses seem to have little effect on their probes. They have already breached the outer layers of our planetary shielding." The director's gaze swept across the assembled crowd, settling briefly on Jake and Erex. "We must prepare for the possibility of a direct confrontation. All senior faculty and advanced students are hereby conscripted into the Planetary Defense Force. The rest of you will assist with fortifying the academy and preparing for potential evacuation." As the auditorium erupted into a cacophony of voices, Jake felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Instructor Zix standing behind him, their iridescent skin pulsing with urgent patterns. "Jake, Erex," Zix said, their voice low and intense. "The director wants to see you both immediately. You're Unique abilities may be our best hope in this crisis. As they followed Zix through the twisting corridors of the academy, Jake's mind raced. An unknown psychic threat, immune to standard defenses. It seemed like something out of a nightmare. But beneath the fear, he felt a growing determination. This was what he had been training for, wasn't it? A chance to prove that humanity's place in the galactic community was more than just a curiosity. They arrived at a heavily guarded chamber deep within the academy. Inside, Director Vaxloren stood before a massive holographic display showing the approaching threat. A roiling mass of dark energy that seemed to devour the stars themselves. "Ah, good you're here," Vaxloren said, turning to face them. "We don't have much time, so I'll be direct. Our conventional psychic defenses are useless against this entity. We need something new, something unpredictable. We need your creative psychics." Jake stepped forward, studying the ominous display. "What exactly are we dealing with, Director?" Vaxloren's skin rippled with frustration. "We're not sure. Its psychic signature doesn't match any known species. It's as if it's not entirely of this dimension." Erex's silver eyes widened. "An extra-dimensional being. But that's theoretical at best. How could such an entity even interact with our reality?" "That's what we need to figure out," Vaxloren said grimly. "And quickly. At its current rate of approach, it will reach our planet within 48 hours. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He turned to Erex, seeing his own mix of fear and determination mirrored in the Volcran's metallic features. "All right," Jake said, taking a deep breath. "Let's get to work. We'll need access to all the data you have on this entity and a secure space to conduct our experiments. And we'll need volunteers, the most imaginative, open-minded students and faculty you can find." Vaxloren nodded, relief evident in their posture. "You'll have whatever you need. The fate of our world may well rest in your hands." As they left the chamber to begin their preparations, Jake couldn't shake a nagging thought. This threat, as terrifying as it was, also represented an opportunity. An opportunity to show the galaxy what humans and their alien allies could achieve when they worked together, combining the best of their abilities in the face of the unknown. The next 48 hours would determine not just the fate of the Academy, but potentially the future of psychic science and interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. And at the center of it all stood a human and a Volcran, united by friendship and a shared vision of what was possible. Jake allowed himself a small, determined smile. Whatever this extra-dimensional entity was, it was about to learn a lesson about the power of human imagination, combined with alien psychic prowess. The battle for the Academy, and perhaps for reality itself, was about to begin. Humanity's stand. The next 2 days passed in a blur of feverish activity. Jake, Erex, and their hastily assembled team of creative psychics worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of their abilities in ways they had never imagined. Their workspace, a repurposed simulation chamber deep within the Academy, had been transformed into a chaotic blend of alien technology and improvised human ingenuity. Holographic displays flickered with constant updates on the approaching entity, while the air hummed with the combined psychic energy of a dozen different species. "It's not working," Kellic said, his bioluminescent tendrils dimmed with exhaustion. The Aetherian had been instrumental in helping to visualize the team's psychic constructs, but even his otherworldly perception was struggling with the task at hand. Jake ran a hand through his disheveled hair, fighting back his own fatigue. "We're missing something. This entity, it's not just powerful, it's fundamentally different. Our psychic constructs just slide off it like water off a duck's back." Erex, who had been staring intently at a complex psychic equation floating in midair, suddenly straightened. "Wait. What if that's exactly the point?" All eyes in the room turned to the Volcran. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, a glimmer of hope kindling in his chest. Erex's scales rippled with excitement. "We've been trying to create barriers, weapons, shields, all based on our understanding of this reality. But this entity isn't from our reality. What if instead of trying to stop it, we try to redirect it? A murmur of interest ran through the assembled team. Jake felt his own imagination kick into high gear, building on Erex's idea. Like a psychic prism, he said, the concept taking shape in his mind. We don't try to block its energy, we refract it, scatter it back into the dimensions it came from. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as the team raced to implement this new approach. Jake and Erex led the effort, their complementary skills forming the core of the developing technique. Hours ticked by, the threat looming ever closer. Finally, mere minutes before the entity was due to make contact with the planet's outer atmosphere, Jake stepped back from the central psychic amplifier, his face pale but determined. "It's ready," he announced, "or as ready as it's going to be." Director Vaxloren, who had been overseeing their work, nodded gravely. "Then we have no choice but to deploy it. The fate of our world rests in your hands." The team made their way to the Academy's central spire, the highest point on the planet and the nexus of its psychic defenses. As they emerged onto the open platform at its peak, they were met with a sight that would haunt them for years to come. The sky was torn asunder, reality itself seeming to warp and twist. Through the rift poured a mass of rioting darkness, shot through with flashes of alien energy. The very air seemed to scream in protest at the intrusion of this extra-dimensional horror. Jake took a deep breath, centering himself. He felt Erex's steady presence beside him, the Volcrin's metallic hand cool against his own. Around them, the rest of the team formed a circle, their minds linking in preparation for what was to come. "Remember," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides, "we're not fighting this thing. We're guiding it, reshaping its path through reality, like water around a rock." As the entity descended upon them, Jake reached deep into his mind, drawing forth every ounce of creative energy he possessed. He felt Erex's precise psychic control intertwine with his wild imagination, forming a construct unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The air around them shimmered, then erupted in a dazzling display of psychic energy. It was as if reality itself was being repainted, the colors and textures of the world shifting and flowing like a living impressionist painting. The entity struck their defenses with the force of a collapsing star. Jake felt the impact reverberate through his entire being, threatening to tear his mind apart. But he held firm, pouring every memory, every dream, every flight of fancy he'd ever had into the construct. Erex's presence in his mind was like an anchor, providing structure and form to Jake's raw creative output. Together, they shaped the psychic energy into a vast, multi-dimensional lattice, each facet reflecting a different aspect of reality. The entity, confronted with this kaleidoscope of realities, began to falter. Its dark tendrils, which had so easily penetrated conventional psychic barriers, now found themselves twisted and redirected. Everywhere it tried to push through, it encountered not resistance, but redirection, its own energy used to guide it away from the planet and back towards the rift from which it had emerged. The battle raged for what felt like eternity, though in reality it lasted mere minutes. Jake and his team poured everything they had into maintaining the construct, their minds stretched to the breaking point and beyond. And then, suddenly, it was over. With a silent scream that shook the foundations of reality, the entity retreated. The tear in the sky began to close, reality knitting itself back together in the wake of the invader's departure. As the last traces of the extra-dimensional horror vanished, Jake felt his knees give way. He collapsed to the platform, dimly aware of Erex and the others doing the same around him. Exhaustion unlike anything he'd ever known washed over him, but with it came an overwhelming sense of relief and triumph. They had done it. They had saved not just the Academy, but potentially the entire galaxy from a threat beyond imagination.